The Miami Heat and Milwaukee Bucks will be facing off in the playoffs once again like they did last year, except this time it's going to be in the first round rather than the second. Last time the Miami Heat shocked the world and really came onto the scene when they beat the Bucks in just 5 games convincingly. So the question of today's video is, can the Heat do this again? Can they beat the Bucks when they are not favored, or have the Bucks made the right adjustments to where something like what happened last year will not happen again versus this team? Let's talk about it. Before I continue on with this video, about half of the people that watch these videos are not subscribed, so if you fall into that 50%, then please subscribe. Also drop a like on this video. It only takes 1 second and it makes a massive difference. And this kind of video is going to be done over and over for pretty much every playoff series outside of like obvious ones. Like I'm not going to make a video on who will win between the Sixers or the Hornets or things like that, but I'm going to be doing a bunch of series previews, series recaps, what's next for teams after they lose a series, things like that. So if you're looking for playoff content, I'm going to be pumping out videos like this on this channel as well as my second channel until the finals are done. So in terms of whether or not the Heat can repeat what they did versus the Bucks last year, what's first important to note is what the differences are now between both of these teams. The team that's made the biggest changes by far is obviously the Milwaukee Bucks. The Bucks added Jrue Holiday, implemented a more effective defensive scheme, and Mike Budenholzer has seemed more willing to adjust this season. The addition of Jrue Holiday is huge. In my opinion, he is the second best player on the team, though he's pretty close with Chris Middleton. But regardless, adding a guy of that tier when your third best player last year was Brook Lopez, that's a pretty big deal. Replacing Eric Bledsoe with a point guard that can actually shoot and won't shit the bed anytime they see playoff minutes. A point guard who is bigger and can defend even wings unlike Eric Bledsoe, who is a fantastic playmaker unlike Eric Bledsoe, who can create his own offense unlike Eric Bledsoe. Taking a lot of shots at Eric Bledsoe right now, but Jrue Holiday is a significant improvement. And a big part of why the Miami Heat had success last year versus the Bucks was that there was very little shot creation on this roster. Chris Middleton could not carry the entire load creating on the perimeter, and Giannis was consistently running into the wall, and we'll talk about that in a second. Adding Jrue Holiday means there is another option on the perimeter that Giannis can pass to if he's faced with a defense like that, and Jrue can hit a 3 or he can create his own shot off of the dribble. On top of that, with his playmaking, he is able to assist Giannis quite a bit, and Giannis this year has done a little bit more of playing small ball center and running pick and roll, which is something I've wanted to see from him for a while. It's still not to the extent that I would like it to be, but it is there. Defensively, there was a huge problem versus the Heat, and really versus any team in the league that had a lot of really good three-point shooters, which the Heat did and still do, and that is the Milwaukee Bucks had a defensive scheme that actively allowed open three-point shots. The whole scheme of their defense was, we are going to way overcommit to defending the paint to the point where we're going to give guys like Duncan Robinson wide open threes, which you shouldn't do that. The scheme was Brook Lopez will be the drop big, Giannis will help on the baseline and come bring shot blocking, things like that. Those two combined is going to overwhelm people in the paint, and they're going to kick it out to the perimeter. But not only are those two going to be a part of it, we're going to have our guards and wings come in and like try and poke the ball away, interfere in whatever ways they can. Really get 5 players in the paint. Fuck it. We might as well just make sure no paint shot ever happens, and instead we leave some of the league's best shooters completely wide open. And we saw that defensive scheme fail time and time again versus the Miami Heat and many good three-point shooting teams. But this year, the Bucks are not overcommitting. They still have Brook Lopez as the drop big. They still have Giannis as the help side defender. But guys like Chris Middleton are sticking to their man on the perimeter, and they're also switching more often, which is definitely helpful. Their defense overall is a lot smarter and a lot less risk-takinger. That does not sound correct, but you know what I mean. The defense is not making massive risks for no reason like it used to. Their paint defense is still great, and now their perimeter defense is okay, which it's important to have both of those things, believe it or not. And the fact that we're seeing some Giannis at center, some more Giannis pick and roll, the fact that we're seeing a defensive scheme that is different from what it was for the last 2 years, it makes me actually think that Mike Budenholzer is making some adjustments, and that was really the Bucks' biggest flaw in my eyes, was that Mike just simply did not adjust when the moment called for it. And in the Heat series, the moment called for it over and over and over and over again, and Mike looked like a deer in headlights. As for the Miami Heat changes, they sub out Jay Crowder for Trevor Ariza. There's no Kelly Olynyk, but that's not a big deal for what they were last year. They added Victor Oladipo, but he's injured and he's not going to play in the playoffs, so that's a non-factor. And that's kind of it for the roster changes. There's not much. And outside of struggling a bit this year, mostly due to injuries, a little bit due to inconsistency, the Heat really are not that different from what they were last year. In the regular season, the Miami Heat were pretty underwhelming, but the thing about that is the Miami Heat were pretty underwhelming in the regular season last year. They just turned it on for the playoffs, and that was when they got ridiculous. Also, I did just now remember that Bam Adebayo took a pretty big leap in the regular season as a scorer. So that is one change. I'm curious how that will translate in the playoffs, whether he'll get even more scoring opportunity in the playoffs or maybe less as they fall back into old habits. But Bam has been a lot better at creating his own shot and as a mid-range shooter. But outside of that, I'm just expecting this team to be better in the playoffs as they were last year. This is a team that's going to turn it on for the playoffs, so not much worth analyzing in the regular season. So let's talk about what worked for the Heat last time and what got them the series win. The first thing right out of the gate has to be the wall-style defense. The Heat by no means were originators to this. The Boston Celtics tried it and failed, and the Toronto Raptors tried it and very much succeeded. And the Miami Heat replicated this by putting Bam Adebayo on Jimmy or putting Jay Crowder on Jimmy, even Jimmy. Wait, am I saying Jimmy and not Giannis? Fuck. And by no means are they originators of this defensive scheme. The Boston Celtics tried it and really only with one game succeeded, and outside of that failed. And the Toronto Raptors tried it and succeeded very much. The Miami Heat, no different. They decided to defend Giannis by putting Bam on him, or maybe Jay Crowder or Jimmy Butler, and they would bring help defense on him at the proper time. The whole point was getting big bodies on Giannis, making him uncomfortable, even though he would get to the basket because he's Giannis, and then bringing enough help defense to overwhelm him. Also getting him to run into traffic, force him to make decisions with the ball, and very often he would get flustered and make a bad pass, or if he made the right pass, for whatever reason, the players on the Bucks were not making their open shots. Like, his teammates were missing so many clean looks in that series, and if that happens again, that's going to be a big thing. But this time around, I actually think the Bucks are going to be much more prepared and are going to be better for this. First of all, instead of Jay Crowder, they have Trevor Ariza, who I think is probably like 10 to 15% not as great for this system. He's taller, but I don't think he's as strong and as physical as Jay Crowder. Another important factor is, as I mentioned a second ago, this scheme relies upon players not scoring and not hitting open shots, as well as not creating their own offense off of the dribble. The reason why the Bucks offense fell apart was as soon as you took away Giannis drives, there wasn't much to their offense. Now that they have Drew Holiday, they have both him and Chris Middleton, who are guys that can lead an offense on their own if that's necessary. They also banked on Mike Budenholzer not making adjustments, and I wouldn't entirely be shocked if this repeated itself, because Mike Budenholzer has given me no reason to place any level of trust in him. But I have seen in this regular season that he is more willing to adapt, and if he actually goes in with that mindset versus the Heat and makes changes when necessary, I don't think this wall defense is going to be as effective. So because of the addition of Drew Holiday, as well as Mike Budenholzer seeming more willing to adapt, as well as me finding it unlikely that the Bucks shoot as poorly as they did last time when Giannis was kicking it to them on the perimeter, then I don't think this defense is going to be as effective as last time, but it still should get in Giannis's head a little bit. Also, as for the Heat getting a bunch of open jumpers and taking advantage of that, well, I don't think that's going to be happening to that degree either, just because, as I mentioned, the defensive scheme is not as willing to give up wide open perimeter shots. So the two big advantages the Heat had for this series matchup wise, the wall defense as well as the open three-pointers, I don't think are going to be to nearly the degree that they were last time. Now, in terms of the Bucks actually beating the Heat, if I'm implying that these changes are going to be what makes the difference, well, it's worth mentioning that this was just a 5-game series when it happened, and there were only 2 games of those 5 that were actually close. So it's not as though the Heat just barely scraped by the Bucks, and the Bucks getting this advantage back is going to be the difference maker. It could be possible that the Heat always had the Bucks number, and even if their strengths are not as strong, they can still get past this team. But I'm going to do something that I have made the mistake of doing 2 years in a row, and hopefully not 3 years in a row now, and I'm going to bet on the Milwaukee Bucks. I think they win this series. Now, regardless, I think it's going to be a close series, but I think the Bucks have made the proper adjustments to, at the very least, overcome a team like the Heat that is not as high in the talent department, but just killed them on the matchup. I think it's going to be a close series. I would have to say it's 6 or 7 games regardless of who actually wins. But as of right now, I'm going to go with the Milwaukee Bucks in those 6 or 7 games. Probably not going to age well, though, because the last 2 times I picked the Bucks to win the championship last year, or no, I picked them second to win the championship last year, and I definitely expected them to come out of the Eastern Conference convincingly, and that didn't happen. Hopefully this time I'm right, though. Hopefully the addition of Jrue Holiday, Bud being more willing to adjust, and that new defensive scheme is going to make the difference. But that is the end of this video. Shout out to Rudy for editing this video. Subscribe for playoff basketball talk, and cue the outro music.